Okay, so we are live for another Saturday live stream Q&A session. I wanted to do a review of something, but I just didn't have anything new. So, and instead I actually ended up filming a review yesterday, which I don't know when that's going to come out, probably next week sometime. But yeah, I didn't have anything for today, so I figured we would just launch right into a Q&A session. But as usual, before we get started, let me know how the audio is. Is there any audio sync issues? Any clipping things that I want to avoid? Let me know how it is. I rely on you guys. And then, of course, the usual stuff: comment, subscribe, like, etc., etc. Typical YouTube things that you're supposed to say. And we will get into the live stream. I guess we can start. Someone says perfect, audio's fine. Okay, I guess we could start by talking about what's upcoming on the horizon for some videos. So obviously we have DMS on the channel, and he's already done one video. He covered the headphone, and then hey Michael, what's up? And hey Rob, good to see you. And then so he's also going to be doing a video on the H1000s, which is going to be upcoming as well, and a couple other ones. But then from me, the next review, I'm working on a video that's all about like my process for EQing stuff, because obviously I do EQ headphones, but it's it's not like my process is exhaustive for the way that everybody should be doing it, because a lot of it, I'm in a bit of a unique situation because I use the gross measurement rig, and not everybody else has that. So like the way that I would EQ it is not the way that I would necessarily recommend other people do it. So I'm trying to frame this in the I guess the best way that I can, imagining if you didn't have access to a industry standard measurement rig, and just thinking through how I would go about EQing it if I didn't know what the result would end up being. So it's a little bit more like a little more guesswork is involved there. But of course, at the end of the day, you can actually listen to the stuff, and it ends up being your best, evaluative tool. So that's in the works. And then also I'm covering the Audio-Technica M50x, which is something that I realized I hadn't done a review of. So I have just did measurements yesterday and filmed a review. So that one should be coming out sometime next week. Neck day with Resolve. Yes. This is the Audeze LCD-XC 2021. This is actually an interesting one for frequency response, because when you measure it on the gross, there is a peak that shows up at around like 5.6K, or like between 5 and 6K. And that peak's just not there, like subjectively. So it's likely shifted to a different spot. And when you go about trying to fix that, if you were to fix it based on the graph, you would end up with some issues there. By the way, as I mentioned with the audio, let me know if the sync is working, if it sounds like it's actually coming from me, not delayed, because I did change a setting there. We still got 4 minutes before I'm supposed to start, before it was scheduled to start, but that's okay, we're starting early. But yeah, I changed the setting there to sync up the audio a little bit better with OBS. But yeah, I think we might as well get into the Q&A session, given that it sounds like things are good. And so feel free to ask any questions, and just about whatever, and we'll get to it. Is the LCD-XC 2021 still 700 plus grams? Yeah, it's a heavy boy. I need to measure this again. I don't remember what I ended up with for the measurement, but it was less than the older version by a meaningful amount. But I think that also has to do with the fact that they changed actually it might be less than 700 grams, but I'll double check for you. They changed the cups, obviously, but they also changed the pads, and then they changed the actual magnet array. So they took out some of the phasers. Sync is good, audio's all right. All right, cool. Don't tell Zeus you like the M50X. I kind of don't like the M50X. It's actually not as bad as what I think, audiophiles make of it. It's not actually that bad at all. It's just that the K371 exists and is better in every single way, except for build quality, because the M50X is, yeah, I mean, that thing, it lasts a long time. It's more mechanically sound. It's just, yeah, the sound quality. And so I guess I just spoiled the review. But that's okay. Not everybody's going to see this. So it's meant more for, I guess, a general audience that isn't, like, this is the thing that kind of blows my mind. Is like when people are buying things like the M50X, what are they reading that convinces them that it's a good idea? That's the thing that I don't quite understand. Because that headphone was, very highly regarded, very well regarded for years. And a lot of people ended up getting it. And, the question is, are they getting it now still because of that, like, inertia? Their friend tells them, oh yeah, the M50X is the way to go. Or are they actually bothering to read something where someone has said, yes, the M50X is the way to go? Because I don't think it is the default entry point into, nice headphones anymore. It might be. Like, actually, my, back in a job I used to work, I used to do a lot of, like, documentary, like, I'd be out in the field doing a lot of documentary stuff, like, interviews and things like that. And for monitoring purposes, it was actually great because it did have pretty good isolation. And then also, it was the kind of thing where, like, we didn't have to worry about whether or not it was going to survive the trip. So, yeah. All right. Hey, Resolve, you've previously mentioned that the Aeon Open X might be a better fit for metal/rock music. Why and what makes a good headphone, rather FR in this case, better for specific genre? So my reasoning for that, yes and no. I think that the tuning there actually is one of the best types of tunings that you could, like, that's the type of tuning you should look for those genres, because the bass focuses more on the mid bass and the upper bass, less the sub bass, whereas on the closed it's less the mid bass and upper bass, more the sub bass. So that already is, like, it's gonna make those genres sound a little bit more full and a little more lively and engaging, because the bass doesn't often, not in all cases, but often doesn't fully token the sub bass frequencies, and or at least it's not dominating down there, and so if you want to get nice full sounding presence to your heavy metal music, that's one thing to look for. The other thing is that headphone has a really smooth treble response, and it's the kind of thing that it reminds me a little bit of, like, the HD6XX in that regard. Like, it's got a really non-fatiguing kind of treble presentation, and for a lot of those recordings they are a little more on the aggressive side, and there is a sense in which maybe you'd want that, but I think that it actually the smoothness and the non-fatiguing qualities of that type of tuning really lend itself well to being able to kind of turn the volume up and not have your ears be pierced. So I don't recommend headphones like the Bear Dynamic stuff for that, because they're very treble peaky. Not all of them, but, like, the majority of them are. And that can make that stuff, it basically makes it so that, like, certain tones are just overemphasized, and there's a lot of stuff going on in busy passages with cymbal hits and things like that. So again, I also recommend a planar for that. Welcome to What Is Detail, episode 16. Oh god, it's what Mary didn't know, and for anybody who's studied Frank Jackson's What Mary Didn't Know, you'll know what I'm talking about. And it's probably not that many people. But yeah, so I'd aim for a smoother treble response, nice pronounced, let's say less than optimal for good music, but I say good music, well recorded stuff, serious audiophile recordings and stuff like that, but more optimal for classic rock and stuff that doesn't fully token the sub bass frequencies, and then a smoother treble. Plus, the nice thing about a planar is that it It's got really good instrument separation and control during busy passages, so things don't blend together as much, and this helps you sort of isolate the individual lines a little bit better when there's lots going on. So that's my reasoning there for why the AN Open X is good for that. The downside to the AN Open X for those genres is that it is not at all, like, it lacks any sense of punch and impact, which is something that, you know, people would probably want for that. And so, yeah, I mean, there is a sense in which something like a Focal Alex or Clear would be more desirable because the bass is just way better on those, and it is more punchy and impactful. So, yeah, I mean, it might be worth it to go, you know, in that direction. Plus, there is a little bit of that sort of blunting character for the detail on the Aeon Open X, but again, that's where those genres, it's actually okay. That's at least, you know, how I like to listen to those genres, right? Because I do enjoy those genres as well. I know there's probably somebody out there who's like, yes, Grados for classic rock and metal, and I'm just like, nah, I can't. Does anything top the Blessing 2 Dusk in its price range right now for IEMs? No, but I would personally choose the SA6 over the Blessing 2 Dusk. But I think at that price, yeah, the Dusk is, because it's less expensive, is the way to go. It'll be interesting to see what Duna comes out with the Vulcan. I haven't heard that one yet, but I saw some promotional stuff on Twitter, so that's I'm excited to hear that one when it comes out. What headphone have you owned the longest? That I still own? That's a good question. What headphone have I owned the longest? Because I've sold a lot of headphones. I've gone through. Oh, you know what? I have an answer to this. It's one that I don't technically keep around here, but because I gave it to my dad. But the SHP 9500. That's a headphone that I bought in 2014, 2015, 2014. No, maybe even earlier than that. And you know, I had no use for it. You know, it was fine, you know, for the price at the time, and so I just gave it to my dad. I think that's technically the oldest one. But I mean, yeah, like if I think about like headphones that I owned previously for a long time, it would have been, yeah, like the Hifiman HE500 and the Denon D2000. And you know, just over time, I eventually sold those because I moved to something else, and I still kick myself for selling that HE500. All right, next. Do you think that the Juno SA6 is the best IEM to get in its price range if the Moondrop shell gaps your ears too much? Gapes your ears too much. As a great sentence. Yeah, I do think so. Yeah, I mean, that's the Moondrop like Blessing 2 shells are pretty big. And but you know, the SA6 shell, it's not like it's small, but I do find the SA6 to be more comfortable, but that's something that's uniquely personal, right? Which is best for technicality, U12T or an Olay VX? I'm the wrong person to ask about that, because it's been a long time since I've evaluated the U12T, and the Anole VX I've only heard once at a meetup. So, and I don't even, yeah, and I didn't even do that comparison then. So, yeah, I would need to do a proper evaluation sometime. Which is Hifiman HER9 has now been released outside of China. What competes with it? Aeon Focal. That's one that it's not been on my radar. For me, Hifiman is like planars. And what they've done with their dynamic driver stuff, there's the one that they did for drop, and that one was not that great. And I know they had the HE350 or whatever, that older one that they did as well, and also not that great. So yeah, I'd be curious to try it, but it's just not on my radar. which of these headphones would you pick for best planar bass response? LCD4, LCD5, Abyss 1266TC. Out of those, I actually think the Abyss has the best bass response, depending on, how you, because with that one, they basically use the resonance frequency to give you the bass boost. So depending on how how much air gap there is when you're wearing it, you could have more or less bass. But it's not intended to seal, and or at least that's what they say, meaning that you actually are going to get a bass boost in most cases. And that's a thing with planars, like if they're like this, right, where they couple to the side of the head quite strongly, and this is a closed back, so we're dealing with different things, but like imagine this was like the LCD-X open. When you couple this to the side of the head, it as Blaine says, it creates a system with the ear. But more importantly, the bass, you get fully linear bass extension all the way down when you don't have any gaps, right, in the front volume. But when when there's a gap for one reason or another, like say the fit's not quite right, or another example would be like those Hifiman egg-shaped headphones, like this one here, the Edition XS. That if there's a gap there, it'll cause basically a boost in the bass. So that's why, like, when people say, oh yeah, like it doesn't match the bass shelf of Harman, it's like, yeah, but it can't. Unless you're doing some kind of like trickery with deliberate leaks and things like that. Let's see what's next. Any plans to bring DMS on the live stream at some point? Yeah, at some point. I think it's his birthday today, so everyone say happy birthday to DMS. Will you be reviewing the Chord Mojo 2 if I can get my hands on one? I don't. Maybe. Yeah. Thoughts on tube preamp solid state headphone amp versus solid state pre to tube headphone amp. No, I don't have any thoughts on that. Sorry. Isn't it like, I mean, I don't do the whole preamp thing, but one of the advantages, if I remember correctly, was that you'd have a little bit more flexibility with volume if you were to use a preamp. So I would say solid state as the pre, but it probably depends on the amps. It's just been hyped up. What's been hyped up? Let's see if I can find what you're talking about. The SA6. Okay, the SA6 has been hyped up a ton by consumer-based reviewers and pops up when people search for good headphones because of the sheer amount of coverage. It's because it's awesome. The SA6 is like, if you look at the frequency response, it's like the budget U12T. It's very similar to that kind of balance, and that's like one of the very best IEMs in the world. So it stands to reason that people are recommending the SA6, myself included. All right. Do you listen? I couldn't answer the best top of the line for heavy metal, not without EQ. This is a solid choice if you EQ it, but not without EQ. Do you listen to sine sweeps to find peaks / dips in headphones frequency response? How do you feel about how do you feel confident in your corrections adjustments if they differ from Harman? All right, so there is a little bit of like misconceptions about what is actually desirable for treble response. And when people talk about peaks and dips, it's usually with a negative association there. But actually, you do not want equal loudness because, and you could try this yourself. If you take, it gets a bit complicated, but if you use Room EQ Wizard and you basically check the box for tone generation that allows you to track the frequency that gets played tracks the cursor, you can actually just like move it all around, and you'll get whatever that frequency is being played, right? So I'm tempted to demonstrate this, but It's gonna make really weird sounds on the stream. um, but essentially, you can do a manual sine sweep. That's and have it be wherever you want. And so this allows you to, in theory, find where things are strong or are louder and quieter, in above, especially like in above 3K and above 5K, right? So that's how you can identify, potentially you can identify certain peaks in the frequency response. But the problem with this is that there are definitely places where those peaks should be, depending on the person's HRTF, and you don't actually want equal loudness. And you can try this because if you EQ out to get things to be perfectly equal loudness, things will sound wrong, like just straight up wrong, like voices in particular, like the consonant tones in vocals will, like, you'll hear that like the S's, F's, and T's end up being kind of like fuzzy and muted sounding. It sounds like there's no actual. It honestly sounds like it removes any sense of resolution to those tones, and clarity to those tones. So yeah, you don't actually want equal loudness, and the reason for that is when you listen to those sounds in real life, there are certain frequencies that are elevated over other ones, and so this idea that we should just have perfectly smooth, result in the treble, that's just wrong. Now, there is a sense in which we don't want major, issues. And then, for that, yeah, you could do that, and you could find it that way. Like if you do like a slow sweep, up to 12K or up to, well, whatever, you probably won't hear that much in the 17K stuff, but like just a slow sweep up, if you hear major deviations in volume, then yeah, that's something to to consider, and you could probably get them a little closer in line, so that they're not massively out of whack. And I do recommend using it to check, but I don't recommend chasing this equal loudness thing. I'm sorry, that's a bit of a rant. What's up, Kryn? And OpenX or LCD-X or Alex? I'm going to say Alex or LCD-X. I mean, they're not in the same price bracket, though. Because you also have the clear there as well. And if LCD-X is what, 1200 or 1100, something like that? I'm going to say if you don't EQ, just get the LX. If you do EQ, LCD-X. Don't know if it's been asked about this, but does this mean DMS is now with you guys? Abyss and himself? He's a busy boy. He's basically working on videos for our channel and for his own channel as well. But it makes sense, the non-headphone related stuff is a much larger audience than just the audio stuff. We were a little bit on the niche side, so there was a mutually beneficial situation there, for everybody involved. Sorry. Did you remove the damping of the Tiger 300 Arya? No, I still need to do that. Thanks for reminding me. It's just like a ever-growing cascade of things that pile up on my plate that I need to do that I inevitably don't have time for. So it's more of a matter of priorities, but yeah, that is something on my radar. Would you need more mid bass and upper bass for metal and rock? I mean, it depends how much you're talking about there, but you want like the bass boost. Basically, the point is like if the bass boost is more to the sub bass, in some of those recordings you might not actually even hear it. And so if you want a bass boost, again, some people don't, but like if you do want a bass boost of any kind, it would be better for that to be in the mid bass for those genres. And at a certain point, you just have to kind of like, bite the bullet on the recordings not being that great in many cases. Like, I'm thinking of Metallica. But, I listen to a lot of metal albums that actually are well recorded. I think the new Leprous album is decently well recorded, and so that one actually, it's a little more like, I'm not gonna say it fully tokens the sub bass, but like, yeah, you can have more correct tunings and have it sound great. So it does exist. All right. Have you tried the ZMF new pads for Bayern 6XX? Nope, but I think DMS has. Fostex TH900, I haven't tried that one. Or wait, I might be confusing that with the 909. Yeah, I still need to try those high-end Fostex though. Can you recommend any open backs which sounds similar to the K371 under 300? Open backs that sound similar. No, because the K371 has a sub bass shelf, and again, it's a difficult thing to do with open backs, or it's an impossibility without certain design things. But as far as the rest of the tonal balance, if you're looking for that, I'm going to recommend the Hifiman Sundara and an amplifier, but that's around 350. Maybe if you don't want to spend as much money, the HE400se, but again, it's not exactly like the K371 either. So I would just say HE400se or HEX4, do some EQ, add yourself a bass shelf, or Sundara and a bass shelf. Pardon me. One big one you need to do is the DT770 in addition to the M50x. I know, I need to get a DT770 in. Yeah, it's it's a thing. Or you said, I know there was a 600 ohm version that isn't made now. I'd want to get whatever is the most, like, I don't know, best version of that, that's still in production. Let's see. Every once in a while, the YouTube chat thing just, like, goes to the bottom, which is pretty annoying. So now reading backwards up. In-ear fidelity will be up by the headphone show next. Nah. I would love to, collab more with Kryn. I would love to have Kryn as one of our reviewers, but he's doing pretty well on his own. At the moment, though, I was thinking actually we should do a live stream together again. We could help out, the Chronicle Plus channel a little bit. Drive some traffic your way. No, this is DMS. He's just disguised. Which wireless headphone do you think sounds best? The Sennheiser Momentum 3. I mean, there's obviously these, like, there's like the Ananda BT and stuff like that, but that is, the frequency response of that is a bit wild. So for like normal wireless headphones, I'm gonna say the Sennheiser Momentum 3. There is that new Mark Levinson one, but that does have issues in the upper treble. But the rest of the balance is actually pretty amazing for a wireless headphone. Also, the Audeze Mobius is a wireless headphone. It's not noise cancelling, but I'm actually going to say Audeze Mobius. It's got a solid frequency response. It's a bit like gimmicky for all the different features, but the default tuning there is pretty good. But I think the other thing is that most people were saying it's more to be used as a wired headphone because there is like a delay, I think, like when you're watching movies and stuff like that. So that might be an issue. Hi, I'm new to this hobby. For the highest sound quality, should one upgrade audio cables? Have you ever measured and seen any differences? Yes, I have measured. No, I have not seen differences. And no, you should not upgrade audio cables. You should upgrade, if you're into headphones, you should, Corinne is right. The headphones make the biggest difference by far. The only consideration there is that if you're using like an old shitty laptop with like a Realtek controller that sucks as your output, then there is a reason to also get, a DAC or a DAC amp or something like that. But the headphones are going to make the biggest difference. Then get into the DACs and amps and all that stuff. And I don't think you need to worry about upgrading cables. No, that overhyped statement was about the 88. Oh, what are you talking about with the M50X? Oh, was it? Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about the SA6. I'm like, yeah, the SA6 isn't overhyped. It's hyped for good reason. All right, I got to catch up here because like you guys are talking about something else that. Yeah. Let's confuse viewers with rants about squiggly lines for 2 hours. Yeah, I would love to do that. Yeah, I really enjoyed your Crin's video on the you don't need an amplifier thing. I mean, this is kind of the thing that I've been saying for a long time, that like amplifiers or like source equipment is kind of like the biggest sunk cost fallacy that people make in this. Well, I mean, apart from cables and things like that. I mean, that's, yeah. But like for things that, people chase, let's say for assumed good reason, it's such a sunk cost fallacy because people will try and fix headphones that they might as well just fix it with EQ if they're going to do that, right? They'll try and fix a certain type of sound by spending way more on the source equipment than they do on the actual headphones. I'm not saying don't buy nice equipment. There's reasons to have nice equipment, but like don't think that it's going to magically transform your headphones, because in the majority of cases they don't actually change the frequency response at all. And there are exceptions to this, like the i-Fi X bass stuff and some transformer coupled designs, but like, man, that is like, if someone's like saying, oh, should I buy, say they bought the Focal Clear and they're like, oh, what $1,000 amplifier should I get with the Focal Clear? It's like, no. Don't do that. You could pool all of your resources into the thing that's going to make the most difference. Maybe later on down the road get an amplifier or something like that, but like I don't think it makes that much difference. Critical plus plus. What? HE650 SEV2 versus Arya? What is that? Do you mean HE560 SEV2 versus Arya? Actually, it's funny. The HE560 that I heard not that long ago, I don't think it's a current one. I think it's like one of the revisions of it. It was actually really good for detail, like really solid. It was still a little bit on the soft side of things, but it was really nice. But yeah, the Arya is a very it's a bit neutral bright, but it's a solid platform. Yeah. The whole point of the LCD-X was, sorry, there's talking in the background here. The whole point of the LCD-X was to be as efficient as possible so that it is easy to drive in the studio. Has information about its design goal be lost? I see a lot of people asking this now. I'm not sure if that's to me. I think it's an interesting topic. But yeah, the LCD-X is something that you can drive from like most things. I did see some goalpost shifting on that in various different communities and things like that, where people were talking about power delivery required for it. And honestly, my experience with it has been that whether you're running it from a like a THX AAA1 or something very modest, or running it from an SPL Phonitor X, the difference is minimal. It's not something where I'd be confident with, like at least with the LCD-X, right? Because it is not something that really changes all that much. Maybe a tube amp would change it more, but yeah. Okay, let's see. Let's see. What amp do you recommend for the Susvara? I recommend that EF1000. No, I'm evaluating the EF1000 right now, which is a $1,500 amplifier and power source. Sorry, $15,000 amplifier and power source, which is crazy. But yeah, that's That's. I mean, am I gonna recommend people do that? I don't know. I think at that point it's like, yeah, you're spending $6,000 on a headphone. I mean, you probably have the money to get some nice piece of source equipment. The bundle, I guess, makes a certain amount of sense. I guess. Think of the savings. But no, it should be fun. I mean, we're getting the Susvara sent back from, I think Chrono had it most recently. And I'll give that a whirl. And I want to compare it against the Enlium, which I don't know if we have available yet, but I'll compare it against a number of other high-end sources. We also, again, as mentioned, we have that ABX box. So that's, or at least it's in the works. It just takes time. And so that'll be fun to do. And I'm not going to be posting impressions until, I might post impressions, but not post like any conclusive results or findings with it until I get that ABX comparison. And then I want to do, let's try Magni 3 against, or let's try topping A90 against that thing and see how well it does. So I hate how many people thought that the video was me saying amps don't matter when the point was about needing an amp to fix headphones, which is false. Yeah, there's so many people who don't realize that amplifiers don't change the tuning of the headphone. Like they think, oh yeah, this pairing, you have to do this this specific pairing because it's going to give it the best sound. It's like, if you're going to say that, that's fine, but that doesn't mean that you're changing the frequency response of the headphones, right? But your argument has to rely on other qualities or something else, right? Because the frequency response is not changing. The only times it's going to change is if you have output impedance differences, and like, for example, like high output impedance with the Focal headphones, then your frequency response is actually going to change. But in the majority of cases, it's not. So the question is, what else are you buying it for? Is it for power reasons, right? Maybe there is actually a reason, like Corinne mentioned in his video with the HE6, there is a reason to get a powerful amplifier for that headphone. But also, like, maybe there's, if you're getting into tube amps and things like that, then that is going to actually potentially change the frequency response. Also likely because of the output impedance. But there are situations where tube amps roll off the bass and roll off the treble. So, yeah. But for the most part, solid state amplifiers do not change the frequency response. You might as well just, if you want to change the frequency response, that's where I'm going to say just EQ it. All right, let's see. Sorry, can you guys hear that? Like, really loud conversation going on. 1 second here. I'm just going to, 1 second. Guys, I will be right back. I'm just going to close the door. 1 second. All right, that should be better. Back. Let's continue. If I missed your question before, just feel free to ask it again, and I will do my best to get to it. Is the U12T good for metal? Yes. Yes, it is. Are the Harman test subjects living off the grid these days? I will say, people just need to read that research, and also the Hammershaw and Mahler research. But it is that, I mean, I don't expect people to do that. Let's see. I don't have any opinions on the 2-channel drama. I honestly, I've heard about it, but I have not seen it, so I don't have any opinions on that. Resolves hearing voices in his head. It's funny because that actually made it. I was talking about like isolation and like clamp pressure for the M50X and how good it is at isolating, and that was one of the things I brought up. It makes it so that I only really hear the voices in my head. I'm not sure if it's gonna make it in the video though. HE6 SE versus Arya, aren't they supposed to be similar in the price, brand new? Yeah, but I don't think you can base your judgments on price alone. the things are priced in all kinds of weird ways. Are IEMs like the 7 Hz Timeless and Moondrop Kato drivable by an Apple dongle for optimal quality, or do I need something better? And then I think the question is, what do you consider to be optimal quality? But can they get loud enough? Yes. But and so yeah, I'm gonna say that's all you really need. Now, for me though, I'm in a situation where I prefer to use something like the Q-Deluxe 5K because it allows me to do all that EQ adjustment, which for me is going to actually be the optimal sound quality, right? Then there's other people still who will say, no, you need a DAP, that has, that's all dedicated and everything. And, I'm not going to rule that stuff out. But for me, for my use case, I would probably go with, the Q-Deluxe 5K. Let's see. Do you wear pants? I am wearing pants, yes. This time. All right. What DAC filter do you prefer? Why does it feel like IEMs have a far superior resolution compared to headphones, at least by price to performance? Oftentimes because, it depends what you're talking about. Because I would say they don't. If you're like comparing like, high end stuff. But there is a sense in which the IEM world is so much more competitive, and so there's been a lot of amazingly well-tuned IEMs that have come out in recent years, and that hasn't been the case in headphones. And I think, there's been some that have been really amazing, but like it's not been as common. And I think the reason for that, there's the more competitive, I guess, market as reasons for that potentially, but the other reason for that is what is the way that IEMs get made. And I'm told actually that modeling IEMs and frequency response and the desired tuning is actually pretty easy and has been figured out fairly comprehensively with balanced armature configurations, less with dynamic driver stuff. Tom from Dooney was telling me that dynamic drivers are actually more difficult to tune. So I think that explains, why you see a lot of, because for headphones, like you might say, oh, this is how I want it to sound, but actually achieving that is another, it's another bear to deal with. Are Andrew and Resolve the same person? Who is the real Andrew? So my name is Andrew, and yes, this online on forums and things like that, I go by Resolve. But you can call me Andrew. Also, my boss's name is Andrew as well. So there are many Andrews. No, Andrew's a more reasonable guy. Oh God. What music are you listening to? What music you are listening to is relevant for selecting headphones. The tester should mention that in the review, I think. So, actually, I'm sympathetic to this view, and yes, I agree that it does matter. But it matters less than you might think. And there's actually a paper from the Harman research where they tested this, and they tested to see the effects of, they called it program material, I think, on listener preference. And it turns out that actually there wasn't, it didn't have an effect, or not a meaningful effect. Now, from my perspective, a lot of that is based on more short-term stuff. So I do think that maybe for long-term listening that might be different. But yeah, in theory, it shouldn't matter as much. But I think in practice it probably does. At least on an individual evaluation basis. Like, for example, I like to listen to classical music. Well, not mostly. At least I like jazz. My two favorite genres are actually jazz and metal. But I prefer music with instruments, so I lump that in the category of like classical music and acoustic music, and anything that has I basically I don't like electronic music. And there are other people who really do like electronic music, and I think that distinction matters for what people are going to be more into. But with that said, it's not like I don't listen to electronic music when evaluating. Like I listen to Lindsey Sterling, for example, because I mean she's a violin player, but so there's like the combination of there's electronic elements, but there's also real instruments as well. All right. And actually, I've been thinking about doing like getting into doing album reviews on this channel, um, just because I mentioned it to the other Andrew a while ago. I said, what do you think about us doing album reviews? And he replied saying, yeah, it's kind of you almost think that what we're doing has something to do with music. It's kind of crazy that we haven't. So yeah, I think I'll be doing that pretty soon. And it's funny because the one that I want to start with is the one that I use the most for testing, which is one that I didn't like the album. I thought it was self-indulgent nonsense. And it was Patricia Barber's Smash, I think is the name of the album. And over time, over listening to it more and more, and again, I used it for testing because it was a really good like sibilance tester and for vocals. And also for bass, but it's not. The music wasn't music that I was like drawn to because I thought the lyrics were just too pretentious for me. But then some of the songs I bothered to pay a little closer attention. Went, wow, this is like these songs are actually really well written. And it's I would argue it's actually a really good album, but it's taken me a lot of time. Pablo, thank you. Can you talk about the effects of recommended wattage? My Mojo puts 700 milliwatts into my 20 ohm cans. Audeze recommends 1 to 4 watts. What exactly am I missing? I think you need to make sure that the specs that you're reading there are apples to apples. Use one of those headphone calculators to determine what you actually need for it. There's a number of them out there. I think you could just Google headphone calculator, headphone power calculator, or something like that. Because sometimes it's like, I actually don't know what the Mojo outputs. So sometimes though it's like, 700 milliwatts into, a certain impedance. So I don't know if you actually need 1 to 4 watts. I guess that's what I'm saying. But it might be that, for like what headphones are those that you need 1 to 4 watts? Is that the LCD-2F or is that an LCD-4? Because like the LCD-X does not need that kind of power. Yeah, just another question about LCD-X and amps. You don't need one. Yeah, that's. I mean, it might be that like the other thing to consider here is that 1 to 4 watts is a pretty big range. So Audeze might just be recommending what a pretty common a desktop amplifier is going to have. That's a fairly safe range for like you're certainly not going to need that much power for any other headphone other than some of the crazy high end like HE6 type stuff for LCD4 or whatever. So there might be a reason to consider that, yes, but I think that's mostly just a safe range. But also, as I mentioned, do the calculation, like put in your headphone specs into the calculator and then see what actual power it requires. That's what I would do. It needs a lot of watts because I use 16 dB sub-bass shelf. Yes, okay, that's the reason to get. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, if you need to go negative 16 dB on your pre-gain, then yeah, then suddenly amplifiers matter. Yes. Michael, sorry, I just saw your question there. I haven't heard the LCD-X. Arya stealth magnet is impressive. Yeah, it's an interesting comparison. I mean, so I do. Yeah, I mean, I know people who like one, or and I know people who like the other better. But it's an interesting comparison because the LCD-X is so much less expensive, and I think so. It's interesting they're very different designs. The Arya is probably the largest, like with just a massive diaphragm as far as overall size, massive transducer, and the resonance frequency on the Arya is actually really quite low. And so they're able to actually achieve, a lot of high frequency extension and high frequency presence without sacrificing the lower resonance frequency. And that's nice because if for whatever reason you don't get a perfect seal or coupling, it doesn't matter because the resonance frequency is low enough that the bass isn't going to drop out. And the same with the Audition XS here, right? The Audeze LCD-X, on the other hand, is very different in that it doesn't have nearly that same low resonance frequency. The driver is a lot smaller than the Arya, and the way that they achieve the bass extension there is by the thickness of the pads. So and having the pads kind of conform, with leather pads as well. So you get like a full seal on the side of your head, and so that allows you to get the full bass extension. And that means that they don't have to have as low a resonance frequency there. And so it's interesting to see the two different approaches to this. And but yeah, I'd say that in some ways would be like I think in both cases I'd EQ those headphones, right? With the Arya I'd downshelf the upper mids and treble a bit, and with the LCD-X I would boost put a bass shelf in there. But I would base it on, and there's also comfort that you have to consider as well. So yeah, I base it on whether or not you EQ, because there is a sense in which, and also here's where I think program material would matter. If you're the kind of person who listens to jazz and my genres like instrumental music, acoustic music, I'm actually going to recommend the Arya because it is going to sound more clear. But if you don't, I'm actually going to if you listen to more upbeat genres and things like that, I'm actually going to recommend the LCD-X 2021. Rob, thank you. This isn't the sheltered reef environment of the audiophile forum. This is the brackish estuary of the open internet where we talk, where talk is free and equipment isn't. That's like the best super chat we've ever had. Amazing. All right, guys, let's get into the spicy takes here. I feel like there have been some, but I'm sure I've missed them. You try not to take headphones. This is from Michael. You try not to take headphones directly from manufacturers. I've been avoiding that buy situation as much as possible. There is a flip side to that, and I understand perfectly why. Oh wait, you're talking about like actually like keeping them. Yeah, that's definitely an issue. Something we don't have to deal with because I don't get to keep anything. But and neither do the other reviewers. But there, I thought you were talking about like manufacturers sending you review units and the potential of like golden samples and things like that, because that is a question. It's a question worth raising. But there's a flip side to that, and you see it with some of Amir's reviews where he gets product from users, from people who just say, here, check this out, review this thing. And those might not actually, there's been definitely examples of those things being broken, and then he'd review a broken unit. Now, and I've been in that situation before as well, where I've also reviewed the broken unit, and it's not been a good result, because it's not whatever the evaluation is, it's not actually indicative of what a person would be buying if they're buying that product. It's indicative of what somebody else bought and then broke. So I err on the side of like, it's fine to actually receive units from users, from community members. I think it's totally fine. But at the same time, if you find something that doesn't match what basically, if you find something really weird, right, it's like, this is like broken, or something doesn't work, then I think, yeah, you might as well ask the manufacturer, say, here's what I've got, what do you have? So yeah, I don't think it's fair to publish something if the person you got it from lost the, luck of the draw. or did something to it, right? You never know what people are doing with stuff, putting it in ovens, whatever. Don't do that. Don't put your headphones in the oven. That's also why I don't buy used IEMs, because you never know if they've been through the wash. How do you decide when to end the live stream? That's a spicy take. It's whenever I can no longer wear the LCD-XC. No, just kidding. There isn't really any time. It's just I go until I get tired, or until the questions stop being spicy. Do you think you could get Tyle Hertzens to be on a live stream? Would love to hear his views on audio today. I would love that. I think that would be awesome. The the downside is that, like, he said a lot of stuff that was like, now we know it's wrong. At the time we didn't, like, collectively, or maybe like some people did, but yeah. But I would love to talk to him. He's a smart guy, and he did a lot for the community, the enthusiast subculture. And that was sort of the early frontier as well. Why aren't any of you guys at CanJam today? So at the time, I should say, actually, I think some of us are, but none of the reviewers are. None of us reviewers are. At the time, we weren't sure how CanJam was even going to go because of the situation with COVID and everything. Stream ends when he has to pee, yeah. And so we just decided, like, I want to say over a month ago, basically, that we weren't going to do this one because, we didn't want to risk it. Now, I think things are a little bit more optimistic, and I'd say if it were looking like this, if we could have predicted that the world would be the way that it is now, for the pandemic, we probably would have gone. But it was one of those things where we just had to make a judgment call early on. You had IFI send you a broken amp. It was a review unit that made the rounds. That's another downside with tours. If someone does something to the unit, it's tough. Are you Canadian? Yes. Well, yeah, I mean, isn't it obvious from my outrageous Canadian accent? I don't think we should bother Tyle. He's retired and traveling in a van. Pretty sure headphones is the last thing he wants to discuss. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too. He got out. No, but actually, what's interesting to me, and this is, I mean, you've seen this on the channel, I think, as well. I'm far more interested in the science of it all, like the science behind stuff. And so for me, like, doing video essays and things like that that feels rewarding to do. It feels actually fun to do. And because, like, I honestly don't care. I could not give less of a shit what people buy, because people buy things for all kinds of reasons. What I do care about is, when the public consciousness on something is wrong. Like, if there's a narrative about something that is very wrong because of, hype trains or one reason or another, that's the kind of thing that bothers me a little bit. And it's not just hype trains. Like, there's all kinds of other situations, like the Syned example, right? I love doing that video because, there was this idea among, not everybody, but among people who would read that stuff and go, oh, this must mean it sounds better, and then that narrative kind of took off about, audible transparency and all that. I thought, this is bullshit. And Krins mentioned similar things, basically it's there is a sense in which kind of blowing the whistle on some of that stuff it's important. And so yeah, I think that that's why this is rewarding for me to do. I don't care. People buy things that I would never buy, right? Because I have different preferences. People want V-shaped kind of sound. People want all kinds of maybe people want extra bright stuff. Like people like Grados, for example. I would never. I wouldn't. So to me, yes, there are things that I would buy personally and I've put that in my ranking there. It's what that's for. But it doesn't matter to me if people have different preferences. Is what I'm saying. I'm not gonna tilt against that windmill and say you're wrong for having different preferences. All right, maybe nobody expects that, but what is actually interesting and valuable is more the kind of video essay thing and it's not just about the science of it. It's about looking at behavior in a sense and saying, is this the right, is this, or attitude, I guess, more than behavior, and say, is this the right attitude to have towards something? But yeah, which headphones are you recommending for the Freedom Convoy? There's got to be something funny there. I can't think of anything right now. I was gonna say like get the most like pink cat-eared headphones for the Freedom Convoy. Here's a semi-spicy take. What's up, VSG? Why does Sennheiser go for the overhype and underdeliver marketing strategy? I would goalpost shift that on you a little bit. In what way are they underdelivering? There is so people do companies will have different approaches to marketing. I find the stuff that resonates with me way more than what I think the typical marketing strategies are. Like I'll just ignore most of it. But the stuff that really does resonate with me is if it is more under the noise rather than over the noise. But what works on me is probably not going to work on everybody. So there's probably a vast majority of people who, the over the noise marketing strategy will resonate more with. So that might be a reason why they aim to overhype things. But again, as I said, like for me, if something is overhyped by Sennheiser's marketing department, it has zero effect on me. So unless you're talking about some other type of marketing strategy that they might have that I'm just not aware of. But yeah, I would the other side of it is I would say, it probably depends on the product that we're talking about. Because yeah, like the HD820, HD700, nope. But HD600 and 650 and 580, even 660S to some extent, those are HD800S, solid. Dr. Andrew Rozalov. Oh no. Actually, there was an interesting conversation with Dr. Olive on Twitter about the recent piece we did on the 10 stages of reading headphone measurements. And I think he liked the video. I think he posted it somewhere as well. But we were talking about the stage 8 and the lack of high-res Harman research, basically because it's smoothed to a pretty significant degree. And our critique was along the lines of, it'd be nice to have a more fine-grained target so that we can be a little more specific with what we're after. Maybe not practically speaking, because again, HITF varies significantly depending on the person and the actual ear. But the idea was, okay, if we could have like an average human ear, which is kind of what a lot of this stuff is predicated on. If we imagined an average human ear, we could theoretically get a more accurate target, what would sound best to them. And I think his response was, it's worth reading that conversation because Blaine weighed in as well. I think his response was something along the lines of that those HRTFs are direction specific, and then as you approximate them, the different results, you end up with a more smooth result. And I think while that might be true, I recently had it demonstrated to me that even if you change the direction, those other features don't go away. So in my view, I still think there is a reason to want a more feature specific version of the Harman tilt. Basically, you just have a more feature specific result for the target, and then at least you could say for the average human ear this is the best result, rather than saying for the average human ear this is most likely to sound better than other tunings, coarse grained. But yeah, it's that to me is like a very interesting thing. Trudeau would recommend Kennerton's. No, he wouldn't. Oh god, Canadian politics. That's not what we're here to talk about. Worth mentioning this again, reviewers must separate generally good products versus what we actually would buy. Those two pieces don't have to line up the same way. Completely agree. Yeah. I'm thinking of this more along the lines of like something Kryn mentioned in with IEMs, and I think he was talking about the Titan S, and he was saying how to him it's shouty, but he also recognizes the goodness of the tuning, and I think making that kind of distinction, it doesn't take a lot, but that kind of distinction is like pretty important, where you can recognize something being well done, even if it's not something that you would personally choose. And similarly, I guess you could do the flip side of that as well. Although, I'm not sure if it would make sense the other way around. You could say, this is my guilty pleasure thing. I like it, but it's also not. It's also bad for, whatever reason. You could do that too, I guess. Yeah, I'm thinking there's probably a number of examples. I was mostly referring to their consumer audio division. You're talking about Sennheiser. Oh, TWS and Momentum line, but the latest Surface on Mars marketing in the audiophile space also had their guys tame other expectations consistently. I guess I just haven't seen that. Surface of Mars marketing. I did see that there was a new product up and coming that they're releasing sometime this next month, maybe. Or I don't know. I saw that there was some news about that, but I don't know what it is. So no, I do not have it, if you're wondering. I don't know what it is. But yeah, I'm not too familiar with that marketing strategy. Hot take. Once you have, I love these spicy takes. Keep them coming. Ooh, I see another one. I'll get to that one in a second. HD820 with heavy EQ, make it the best headphone, best closeback headphone. With heavy EQ, you could probably make a case for that. But I think that then goes to other products as well, right? You could take heavy EQ to this, and it would be better. But then it would be heavier still. So, in a sense, yeah, I actually agree. It's a very comfortable headphone. Rebel Amp is made in Ukraine. Hope he's doing okay and continuous production. I hope so as well. That's a scary thing. Actually, I see you guys talking about the Verite. I have a new EQ for the Verite with those particular pads, but what I'm trying, and it's like dialed in, and it's amazing. But I am I'm gonna try and also pad swap with some non-ZMF pads just to see what else changes, because I have some that I think will fit. So yeah, I need to bring that into the studio and do some measurements. Do you oh yeah, I was going to answer this hot take. Once you have your preferred headphone and amp/DAC lines up, investing gobs more money into audio is frivolous. Investing, that's not a hot take. I think investing gobs of money into audio in general is frivolous. I mean, most people don't need anything more than a K371 equipment. You could say the same. You could say most people don't need anything more than a Koss Porta Pro. But yeah, I would still say K371. I don't understand a lot of audiophile terms such as harmony, grain, air, etc. What does that even mean? Well, harmony is just like, that's a musical term. If you're talking about harmonics, that's basically like, so for example, harmonics I can help you out with. Harmony is like a you're talking about like third and fifth, stuff like that, right? Like there's 3-part harmony, there's all kinds of stuff in music that sounds good, right? But it's actually related. But if you look at, if you're talking about like in equipment harmonics, a 1 kilohertz tone has the second harmonic being at 2 kilohertz, third harmonic being at 3 kilohertz, right? But just to make it easy, right? So there are multiples of that. Grain is a description of an experience, which is the absence of detail, and so that's pretty straightforward. I guess maybe it's not straightforward. I think the big question with a lot of that stuff is people will always go, they'll say to you, but what is it? But what is it? Nobody's saying that it is actually anything other than an experience. They're saying that they have an experience and it might be measurable, right? But they're not able to find that, in the measurement. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist there. So the criticism from one particular side, where they constantly say, but what is it? You may use these terms, but what is it? Nobody is just saying that it is anything. It's a description of an experience. It's like saying, I feel nice today. What is it? At least in, I don't know, in my analysis, like I'm not, maybe there are some people who believe in magic, right? but I'd like to think that even people who are making subjective assessments, they think that it's caused by something, that's likely measurable. It's just that they're not evaluating it like that. They're not looking for it in measurements. We can ask Precog for more critical reviews. Oh, can we ask Precog for more critical reviews? I don't think he hates on product enough yet. Really? He hates on a lot of stuff. I want to get more critical reviews from Chrono. It's just that we happen to send, a lot of it is determined by the products that we send, that they're interested in, and they happen to be, I think they'd rather spend time with products that they like, or like that they think are interesting for one reason or another. So for example, Chrono recently did the Susvara, and that was his first time listening to the Susvara, right? And he loved it. And now I imagine if we send him, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but if we send him, I don't know, something Meze Elite, right? I think he'd be like, okay, it's not as good as the Susvara. But yeah, I think I feel like maybe we need to send the other reviewers some more stuff that's not so good. Oh, it was a joke. Okay, yeah. Precog definitely is yeah. He's not afraid of being critical, which is good. Would you recommend the Focal Clear for classical and jazz listeners? The Clear is really good for piano music and vocals, and also anything that benefits from bass punch. But I know people who listen to jazz more than like mostly, and they actually prefer headphones like the Ananda or Edition XS now, I guess, um, or the Arya, and some of those more uh, like mid treble focused, like ear gain mid treble focused types of headphones. So that's a tough question because I do think that they are both good for jazz. It's just in different ways. Um, which one would I choose? That's a tough question. I'll have to think about that because I don't think there's a definitive answer. The Clear and the Alex are, or Lear with the Clear pads and Alex, they're much more similar to the kind of tuning of like the HD600 with that sort of like forward 1.5-ish K range. But then that's sort of balanced out by the contours in the upper mids and the treble. So it doesn't sound like congested or muffled or anything like that. But it is definitely forward there. And what that does is it sort of pronounces vocals and piano tones and things in the mids. It's quite interesting. You guys should find Ishka and Adam as to the team as a writer. I hope that's I hope, you must know that Ishka used to be the writer for us. Before, I basically came in after Ishka. So, and shout out to Ishka. I know I'm not sure he's watching, but yeah, he's one of the Discord buddies. Yeah, he wasn't afraid to be critical as well. Like, so actually, this is a funny thing. Like, I see sometimes criticisms of like the channel. People say like, oh, they only say good things. It was literally based around people who weren't afraid to be critical. We could have hired people who were just going to say nothing but good things about everything, and that provides literally zero value because that's like at that point you're just IGN. Sorry, IGN, but at that point there's nothing there's nothing really that evaluative going on if everything is just positive. So even before I joined, it was all based around like the content side of headphones.com it was all based around people who weren't afraid to be critical. Canadians don't get irony much. What? I might have just missed what you said. I have the A50, and you said that you dislike the A90, which the A50 basically is. Would the iFi Zencan be a good side grade or upgrade? Or should I invest that money into headphones? Invest that money into headphones. So like the reasons I don't like the A90 are like the A90 is a very interesting one because it measures well, and when I compared it to a number of other different sources, I liked it the least. And volume matched, and I use it depends how I'm doing it. Like if I'm doing it with headphones, it's with a sine test tone at 1K. But for listening volume match, a pink noise is the way to go. And yeah, you measure it that way because the problem is if you're comparing headphones. I mean, we're talking about comparing amplifiers, so it wouldn't matter with that. But if we're comparing headphones, something might not be at the same level at that particular spot if you're using a test tone. So you'd have to like a sine wave or something like that. You'd have to actually use pink noise for that. But for amplifiers, I think it doesn't really matter. Unless there is something weird, like say there is an output impedance difference, then yeah, sure. A meaningful one. And anyway, so the A90 sounded the least good. So what I want to do is I want to do that comparison between the A90 and the Rebel amp with the ABX box. And that way there's no goalpost shifting or anything like that. And the cool thing about this is that before, when I said I like the Rebel amp a lot better, Um, there were a lot of people who said, "Oh, you just like distortion. You just don't like a clean sound." And the funny thing is that if you now that the measurements exist of the Rebel amp, it measures well. So that's the problem. And people who do this goalpost shifting on distortion, like it's like, well, that argument doesn't work anymore. So yeah, I think the other thing that I want to get into measuring amps and DACs as well, because we need more sources for that. And just so that we can actually be confident in the results, because I've seen some results of different equipment that measures differently from what you see on ASR, and from other people doing measurements of that equipment. So whether it's due to different unit measuring differently, like unit variation, or a difference in methodology, I'm not sure, but it is something that I think is worth it for us to get into. So with that in mind, I'm curious to see if there actually is something weird going on with the A90 that is measurable, that I'm able to say this is why I don't like it as much. But it just sounds like, I don't know, sounds like lifeless. It's sort of the only way to describe it. It sounds like it's lacking, it's just not engaging. But that's not going to satisfy anybody who is looking for more tangible information, tangible evidence of that. So if with an ABX comparison, with a blind ABX comparison, maybe there's a way for me to say, this many times out of 10 I was able to guess correctly for X, that kind of thing. Then at the very least we can establish that there was a difference in the heard result. Measure baiters stay losing. Oh god. DTS, thank you. I have the H1000se. I have FOMO about Susvara. That's what I say to everybody who buys the H1000se. I say you will have FOMO about the Susvara. Well, I don't say it in those terms, but you get the idea. I also miss the original H1000 a bit. Am I missing out on the Susvara? Thanks for all the info you put out. Yeah, I think you are, if you don't EQ especially. Yeah. That was my feeling as well. Like, there was a time when I was tempted to buy the H1000se. But yeah, I think I have an EQ for it. Give it a shot. It's in an article I think I did a long time ago, years ago. But so I'm not sure if it's still the same, because sometimes there's revisions to that stuff. But I would say, yeah, you probably are. I think the Susvara is a lot better for its tuning. It's significantly better for its tuning, more balanced. But with that said, the H1000se is very detailed as well. Yeah. What are you wearing right now? This is the LCD-XC. How do you know? Each set of headphones / IEMs comes with 2 drivers. So at least with measurements, there's some QC testing involved already. Yeah, you effectively, as this Kryn has mentioned this before on this live stream where we talked about it. He's mentioned that if you treat the second channel as a separate unit, it gives you data on what that would potentially be. I think yes and no to that. I think there is one caveat to that, and it's that oftentimes you'll get like manufacturers will channel match, and that doesn't tell you what the variation is among units. So their drivers are going to match, but that doesn't tell you how different that set is from another set. At least, that's not to say that that's bad or anything if there is that kind of variation, but if there is, then at the very least you would need to supply people with the FR, which, by the way, it looks like Audeze is actually doing. Apparently, I see people asking. Now, the problem is that they don't tell you what the compensation is that they're using. So it would be, or at least I haven't seen any indication of what that is. So it's not exactly comparable to anything that's done on a Gross. But at the very least, you'd be able to compare with somebody else who bought one of them, and you can compare those results, the ones that are supplied by Audeze. So that's something. You're also missing out on buying a substantial amplifier to drive the Susvara. Again, you don't need that much. You don't need a crazy amplifier to drive the Susvara. But there are people who will like. So, for example, if I could have any headphone in the world right now to own, it would be the Hifiman Susvara. I mean, disregarding the $50,000 stuff, but like it would be the Susvara. Now, if you said, all right, now you have to get an amplifier for it, you know, there are all kinds of amplifiers that you could get that would be very good. But I don't think you need to get the $6,000 Enlium, or I don't know how much it costs, or the $15,000 EF1000. I don't think you need to do that, right? I think you can get away with a $500 amplifier. You can get away with a $300 amplifier. You could be happy with a THX 789 or something like that. That's got enough power. So that's not really the issue. I'm not going to be reviewing the Barry Manilow collection. All right. Also, I see what all these chat contributions are going towards: a new audio analyzer for maybe. Actually, that's not a bad idea. We previously said that we were putting it towards a fund to be able to send reviewers places, and we did for CanJam, not this one but the last one. So the money's being set aside, but that is another potential good use of it. Yeah. Wow, Zach sent you a Euphoria? That's crazy. I have one in the studio. I might need to give it a shot. Okay, let's see. We'll go for another 15 minutes. Yeah, I need to try that. The new Stax headphone. I haven't heard it, so I can't really comment on it. But yeah, it would be. That's one that's on my radar for sure. There's a couple other high-end closebacks that are also on my radar, like the one from Denon, the D9200 or something like that. I want to try that out. Let's see. A Diablo will drive this as far. Yes. Yeah, that's I think the question, right? There's people who are driving the Susvara off of speaker amplifiers, right? And they'll tell you if you're not running a speaker amplifier, you're not getting what it can potentially do. If you're not running a Nagra DAC, right? Like there's all kinds of that question. Basically, it's a matter of degree, right? And it can go to ridiculous levels. But do you need those, speaker amplifiers? Do you need that stuff? And this is where I agree with Krint. No, you don't. You need some sort of amplifier for the headphone, sure, but you don't need anything crazy. You don't need anything crazy. What's next? Okay, let's see. Here's another hot take. People can't accept that we don't know what measurement to look for in amps and DACs yet. THX and A90 sound lifeless despite measured well. Tube can sound good despite the distortion. I would say the tubes sound good for the distortion. Distortion... It depends on which type of distortion we're talking about, because there are some kinds of distortion that are high order that are really unpleasant, and then there's some kinds of distortion that are, like, we're talking about harmonic distortion at least. Intermodulation distortion is always unpleasant. If it's audible, it's unpleasant. But yeah, I would say for tube amps, I think you can. I think the trick that you're trying to do here is you're trying to say, we don't know what it is about this type of device that people enjoy. Let's say, other than the cited benefits of seeing glowy tubes. And I think to a certain extent that's right, but I also think that you would look, if you were to look for it, it would be somewhere in the distortion. The problem is that you can't look at the distortion and predict that people are going to like it, right? So it doesn't work the other way around. Carolina Reaper Spicy Take HD598CS is the best close back under $500. Incorrect. I don't even have it here anymore. The DCA Aeon X closed is the best sounding headphone under $500. If you get one that has, there was some unit variation with those because the pads are really thick. Also K371. Shout out to K371. I want what? Okay. I had a chance to demo the Shangri-La and Susvara, and I prefer the Susvara, honestly. I did too. The Shangri-La Junior is one that I actually have at the studio right now, and I'm going to work on a review of it for March, ideally. That one is really nice, but I still would probably go with this Susvara. Like, if you're into E-stats, that's probably, well, that's been up there with the SR007 2.9 or whatever that current version is. That's been up there for me. Both of those for E-stats. Those are the ones that I would probably go towards. But the benefits of the Susvara is that, well, I guess there's the benefits of the Shangri-La Juniors. It's really lightweight, but the Susvara is not that heavy. It's totally manageable. But with the Susvara, I can use it off of a much wider range of equipment. So it's a little easier, a little more convenient. Do you have a public playlist you enjoy listening to that you can share with your audience? And also, what are some of your favorite music genres and personal tastes? So as I mentioned before, my two favorite genres are jazz and, I hesitate to say metal because it's not actually metal. But there are certain artists and albums that are within the metal genre. I think it would be categorized within the metal genre. And the reason for that is I like... I really hate pop music. Like, I hate stuff that is just like the generic, thing that doesn't really try and do anything. And so I find that in some of those genres, mostly in jazz, and not just like traditional jazz, but like, I mean, there's like Latin jazz or flamenco. Like, all these things are technically similar to jazz in a sense, in some of the, I guess, ideas behind them. And but then also within the metal genre, you see people doing all kinds of stuff that's actually very different as well. There's all kinds of crap too. Like, don't get me wrong, but that's, when I hear something that is when I discover something that is just unique and doing something different, I gravitate towards that. Now, as far as if there's a public playlist, yes, that is on the Headphone community forum there. I don't have a direct link to it, but I should add that. But yes, there is a public playlist there. I think it's like songs to test headphones with or something like that. What is it like to hear planars for the first time? It depends on the planar. I think the biggest thing people notice is that everything sounds like tighter somehow. It might be due to the weight of the bass. It tends to be a little more linear. Like, I mean, literally, like, just like flat all the way down. Lower distortion and that type of stuff. Not in all cases, again, but that's probably how I would describe it. Do I need to train my brain and ears? No. You just listen. Pay attention when you listen. That's all I'm going to say. Do I buy a new car or X9000 in Blue Hawaii? Buy a new car. Buy a new car and then buy a K371. No, I'm just kidding. Obviously, yeah, like the prices for this stuff, it's like it's ridiculous, and a lot of it is not for it's not something that the majority of people can afford, and that's like I say, it's unfortunate, but at the same time, you know, there's there are reasons why, like there are actually strategic reasons why some of these things are priced where they are. Um, like I don't know how many of those Sennheiser HE1s they make, but the whole idea there is, you know, exclusivity, and yeah, sure, it probably is the best thing that they could have made, and it probably sounds amazing. But I'm not the kind of person who would ever even consider putting that kind of money into a headphone system. You know, I think personally, it's all going to depend on, you know, the relative means of different people. But like for me, I probably would spend, you know, between 1,000 and 2,000 on a pair of headphones that I would feel really confident is like the right choice. You know, and then maybe like a DAC amp or something like that. And, you know, I have, and definitely in situations where I was less confident about the choice. But yeah, that's about where my it's all a question of how much you care, and I suppose also because I do EQ, that's kind of where I would land. I care a lot. I don't care $50,000 worth. Somebody else might. Is there a headphone that I can feel in my body, like my home theater does? This is the downside with headphones. There's theoretically like vests and stuff you could can get, I guess. Um, but no, it's not. You want speakers for that kind of thing. Michael, thank you. Gotta get to the chore because kids, today is my only day off this week. Cheers, thanks for the hangout. You are very, very welcome, sir. And again, Michael DeLazar has a review channel, so shout out to him and go check out his reviews if you haven't already. I think one of the I see some people talking about, like, you know, you get a sense of, you know, wanting to buy a piece of source equipment because you hear that other people really like it with a given thing. And I understand that that's, you know, there might actually be something to that, but that's also something you have to be very careful with, because you don't know what framing effects are influencing, you know, other people. And this is, I think, the desire to use, you know, objective information and try and find that. But then confirmation bias exists there too, as Corinne mentioned in his recent video as well. So um, it's I don't have an easy solution for you. I think, um, you know, in some ways it's a limitation on, you know, the fact that people can't just like go and try everything. Um, but I would suggest being careful about, you know, taking the word of people who are recommending, you know, just saying, oh yeah, I switched to this and it made a massive difference. You don't know if they're volume matching things. Um, you don't. There's a lot of stuff that you don't know about that report that they've given. I think over time you can come to trust people a little bit, if they've sort of like, you know, given you good advice or good information in the past. But just random people online, I would not base a decision around that. And that includes me. Like if you're new, you know, just wait a little bit before making decisions on my recommendations. Make sure that, you know, you have a sense. Maybe I've reviewed something that you've heard, you know, and then you can get a sense. Son Goku, thank you. Purchased the K371 from your recommendation, and the frequency response was spot on for my taste, but the lack of dynamics, contrast, and detail is so underwhelming. Yes, so exactly. It is that headphone is a great example of something that is extremely well tuned. I mean, it's not perfect actually, but it is very well tuned and probably the best, definitely the best for the price. But you know, I'm going to agree with, you know, what Something Metal said a long time ago, which was, you know, it's still not a high res headphone. You know, it's still not a super detailed headphone in spite of how good it is at its tuning. And that's basically where I land with it as well. For the contrast question, I actually didn't have any. It's at this price point, at like $170 or something like that. There's not. I'm not going to expect the kind of punch that you get with like a Focal headphone or something like that. So, but yeah, I mean, I would agree with that sentiment. Thanks for bringing DMS to the channel. Is Kryn next? I wish. No, we love Kryn. So not just me, but like headphones.com, we sponsor him. It's just that he has no need to join us. He's doing very well on his own. So maybe actually I'd love to collaborate with Kryn in the future on something. I'm not sure what that would be, but he and I actually evaluate in very similar ways. We disagree about a number of things, like for example the bottom part of the ear gain, but we also agree on way more things that we disagree about. So I actually want to do a thing where I go visit Kryn in Singapore because I want to go check out Zeppelin and Co. And I want to go with Kryn to Hawker stands. When we hire Zeos, that's going to be it for you. Yeah, I think that you need to worry about that. What's the best way to get started with EQ? So the best way to get started with EQ, if you, I have a video coming out on this topic, and I'm going to go over like the very basic, thing, because EQ is like a major rabbit hole to go down. And I'm going to say the first thing you should do is download, if you're on Windows, download Equalizer APO, and then get the Piece UI for Equalizer APO. Once you're there, then you can basically take a look at the headphones that you're wearing or that you have, and look at frequency response measurements that are done on industry standard measurement rigs specifically. So for example, anything that's done on like a Gross 43IG or like a 45CA, and then take a look at the target. Make sure you know what the target is. I know there's a lot, and then make your adjustments to try and get your headphone to match the target. Now the problem with that is that you might end up having a different coupling situation. You might end up having there might be unit variation going on. And then, of course, your actual physical ears are changing the sound differently from the way that other people's are or the way that the rigs is. So that's why my advice is to, if you're going to use the target there, EQ to the target below, for the lower frequencies, probably below 4K. I think that's fairly safe. But everything above that, you want to use your ears, and that's where you're going to need to use you're going to need to use music. I think like you can try doing stuff with like Room EQ Wizard, and you can see if there's any peaks and things like that are major issues. But I think again, for the reasons I mentioned earlier, about equal loudness not actually being a good thing, you probably want to just use music and see where the problem areas show up with music, and then you can make those adjustments in with the parametric EQ. Sorry, that is very deep answer to the question, and it goes much deeper than that. So I'll have a video coming out on how I think you should EQ in the future. What do I do when Oratory does not have an EQ preset for my headphone? I don't recommend throwing on, like, Oratory's presets are the best that I've come across, but they're, for the reasons that I mentioned in that recent reasons not to EQ or the case against EQ profiles video. Don't just throw them on and expect that you have the best sound quality. Put them on and use them as a starting point. Because for all the reasons mentioned in that video. But if there is no preset for your headphone, then you got to learn how to do it yourself. I think a lot of people just use Equalizer APO and they don't realize that the Piece UI exists, and the Piece UI just makes everything extremely easy. You like I get serious and did the let's sit back in the chair now? What was I considering? Poutine versus chili crab. Nice. I've noticed the better equipment and headphones I use that the recording quality is huge. Yes, it is. Some stuff sounds great and some like total crap with bad recordings. Yes, but also there are times when people will say, um, like I've seen comments where people say, "Oh, this headphone makes it so that all of your crap recordings are revealed as being crap." I think that's true. There are definitely situations that are like that, but there's also situations where the headphones are just like overly bright, or there's something going on in the treble where it's just like, ridiculous, and it's like that's not revealing that your music is crap. It's revealing that the headphones are crap, or just like they have a weird, something weird going on in the treble. So there's a risk of what is it, false equivocation with those two things. Even though I do think there are examples where there are bad recordings, and if you listen to headphones that are correct, or more, let's say correct for you, let's say, and correct in the HRTFE sense, that those recordings would be revealed as crap. But at the same time, we don't want to confuse that with situations where headphones are just like crazy bright. Like H1000se is a good example. That does not reveal. That's not. That basically just reveals that the tuning of the headphone is just too bright, like, or the DT1990 Pro. That doesn't reveal that your headphones are, or that the music that you're listening to is crap or poorly recorded. It just reveals that that thing is a sibilant headphone. Is there any IEMs that best the SA6 in that same price range? Ah, yeah, and this is an interesting one. This is where I say technically the Moondrop Variations, yes, it does. It is more impressive for a number of things. However, I would still choose the SA6 because the SA6 is one that I wouldn't even bother EQing. With the Variations, I do find it to be a little bit hot there in the upper mids. So, but I also find most IEMs that are well tuned to be a little hot in the upper mids because I know that my ear canal amplifies that region a little bit too strongly. So yes, theoretically the Variations, I think is more impressive, but the SA6 is still the one that I would choose. Let's see. Best EQ app for Mac and iOS. Somebody mentioned that on Twitter and I forgot what it was, but I think you have to pay for the good ones, unfortunately. Is it talking about the Sundara? All right, two more spicy questions, guys. Two more spicy questions. Genre doesn't matter when the headphone tuning is good. Yeah, yeah. But I still think though that there might be like headphones that are good for a certain genre, and I would rather not listen to those headphones for another genre. They might be okay for that other genre, but like I would prefer something else. But yeah, in general, I would agree. The genre doesn't matter when the headphone tuning is good for the most part. Oh, no Edition XS EQ from Oratory. Well, I made one, so you can use that one. But again, the same caveat applies. Don't just fire and forget. Use it as a starting point and then dial it in by ear. And it doesn't take long. Like you're listening to your music, right? If you're going to make any adjustments above 5K, just make sure that it's to your ear, not to match a target or what somebody else's ear is. I suppose you could do shelf filters, and that would be fine. Um, You should give the Quad Era 1 a try. It's not getting the love it deserves. The problem, so yeah, I haven't heard it. And yeah, I need to check it out. But I see a lot of comments where people will say, you should try this headphone. It needs to be, it's the best. And oftentimes it's because they bought that headphone and they really like it, and that's fine. But that also doesn't mean that it's that doesn't mean that it's as competitive given the range of competition that that person might not have heard. So I don't want to say that's going on in this case, right? I need to definitely check out that headphone. But there are times when people say, oh, try out this headphone, try out this thing, and I end up trying it out, and I'm going, this is not like it's not at all competitive. So basically, my point to you is yes, I should try them out, but also don't be disappointed if if my evaluation is not the most glowing because because of that. We get that a lot. Um, Did you know the DMS doesn't like the K371 when you hired him? There's actually a really good explanation for that. K371 and K361 are very similar. When I was doing my measurements of the K371, even just recently, the K371, when you compress the pads more, the bass tuning gets so much more in line. So it could be a situation where he has less, and I think it has to do with actually the actual volume of the pad. So it could be a situation where he has less clamp and therefore more bass. In both cases, you get a seal, but it's just to do with the actual compression of the pads itself. So that could be why. And there's also the unit variation and all kinds of stuff. So yeah. And to be clear, the K371 is not perfect, but it's at that price, like it's ridiculously good. Son Goku, thank you. Would you could only listen to the LCD5 with a Rebel amp or with a Forge for the rest of your life? What would you choose? Forge for sure. That's not that close a comparison. But like Forge is an expensive tube amplifier. The Rebel amp is like a mid-range, like a it's like a what, $600, $500 amplifier. It's not nowhere near as expensive. Closed cans under $400 for content consumption. Uh, like you mean like movies and stuff? I think you're probably asking the wrong guy, but I like the DCA Aeon closed X. I'm pointing at the stand where it was. The DCA Aeon X closed, and I think that's around that price. It's pretty good. Okay, where's the spicy one? Yeah, the heavies thing, I just don't expect that to be any good. uh, I have a question. How does the output power of the Rebel amp compare to the 789 running fully balanced? Less, as far as I know. Like that's the one knock against the Rebel amp, is that it's not very powerful. It's huge, but it's not, you know, I can't I don't know if that got published in the measurements of it. I like to double check, but if I remember back when I was like looking at that, I was like, wow, the Rebel amp actually is not a very powerful amplifier. And it's got enough again for most things, but it's not something I would run an HE6 off, most likely. And I think, you know, it's a single-ended amplifier as well, so that is probably its. Rebel amp has only 1 watt. Yeah. Yeah, that so I need to look at more of the specs for that. And because this is a point of frustration, is that manufacturers never publish specs in the same way. So 1 watt at what? But yeah, it's not a particularly powerful amp. Yeah, Class A. Yeah. Um, if I don't like Harmonish tuning frequency response, then what do you recommend for fun listening? I tried K370, it was not my type. Um, yeah, Fostex TRX00. If you can find one. Maybe that EMU Teak. EMU Teak, maybe. Um, let's see. Usability aside, your take on headphones versus IEMs at the high end, sound quality only. Yeah, headphones they're at the like ultra high end. There's nothing from IEMs that I've heard that even comes close to something like a Susvara. But there are very good IEMs, so yeah. 1 watt at 32 ohm, yeah. So then that helps. But that's not a lot of power, right? So you can get more powerful amplifiers, but at the same time, would you ever need more powerful amplifiers? And argue that most people don't. Um, Rebel amp is so overrated. How would you know? Do you have one? But I mean, for power, like nobody is saying that it has lots of power. I don't think. Spicy take. Okay, here we go. IEMs are not healthy for your ear canal. I had three infections due to IEMs, long-term use, and I kept the tips disinfected all the time with disinfectant. Um, that sucks. I've actually never had an ear infection from using IEMs. I don't know how spicy of a take that is though, because to a certain extent, yeah, putting stuff into your ears probably isn't good. um, but also, if you're not just like, this is also one of the reasons I don't like using the edemotic things. It just doesn't feel good. But I think, yeah, if you're using regular IEMs with foam tips, for example, it's not. I don't think there's that much of an issue. Do you think "quote unquote" neutral headphones sound like real life? Are they even supposed to? Because when I listen to live music, there's just way more bass and treble isn't that boosted like most headphones. Yeah. So it depends, right? If you're listening to the problem with that, okay, I'm going to answer this. If you listen to somebody playing an acoustic guitar in front of you in a good room, I would say then yeah, it should produce, at least as far as the balance between fundamental and harmonic, it should be, that pretty similar to that. If you are at a concert in a massive stadium with huge speakers that are playing, amplifying the sound, that's going to be a totally different experience, and I don't think that neutral headphones should sound like that. I was interviewing, this is years ago, a couple years ago, I was interviewing Fang Bian from Hifiman, and he told me that he would go to listen to classical music concerts at Lincoln Center, or not, classical jazz or whatever, like acoustic instrument. I'm not sure actually what he's listening to, but you'd go to Lincoln Center and you go to basically like really good auditoriums, theaters, and get a really good seat in the middle. And his sense was that he would try and get sound to that his headphones would reproduce to sound like that. So yeah, in the right environments, with the right sound reproduction that the performer has, then yeah, it should sound like that. And I think again with acoustic music it's easiest because there is no extra circle of confusion there, but the room matters as well. Yeah, I'm not gonna watch No Themes reviews. Sorry. There I don't spend a lot of time watching other people's reviews, because it's just it is like a time sink, and I don't want my opinions to be all that, like I'll watch Crin's videos, for example, but that's for different reasons. That's like his videos are hilarious. But yeah, like if I have an opinion on something, it's because it's my opinion on it. I don't want to just repeat what somebody else says. But there are times when, like, after I have come to a conclusion, it's interesting to see who has similar, opinions on things. Oftentimes, like, my opinions line up with Crin's, like I mentioned, but they also line up, I think, even more closely with Android's. Basically, I read everything that Android says and I think, yeah, that's it's basically how I hear it too. So we speak the same language, at the very least. What are your thoughts on Dan's audio reviews? I don't know who that is. When you're trying to figure out, we're trying to get a sense of something and you haven't heard it, and you're doing your research and you're watching reviews, don't, I was thinking how to say this. If there is any opportunity to base your judgment off of objective criteria, I'm going to say use that if you can. There's definitely times when, yeah, of course, there's things that don't perfectly, like, not target adherence, but like they don't perfectly, tell the whole story. But if you can get enough to make a choice about whether or not you're going to like something based on, more objective results, then use that. That's like, I could tell you, I could wax poetic about detail and all this stuff, and that might matter, right? But at the end of the day, you don't know that that's how you're going to hear it, right? That you're just trusting that, I'm saying the right thing or something that it's going to sound the same to you. Whereas if you look at like what the actual objective results would be of a thing, that's something that's a lot more, you can take that basically and you can use that information more concretely. I think if you are going to take those other assessments as like the things to inform your purchase decisions, I think you need to spend a little bit more time watching multiple different reviews. Dan's auto reviews? I don't know who that is. I'm sorry. But yeah, I don't know if that makes sense. But like, if there is some sort of data-based or objective result that is compelling enough to get something over something else, then do that. If your taste aligns with a reviewer, isn't that what watching a reviewer is for? Yes, exactly. But you have to know that your taste aligns with the reviewer. You have to know that, So for example, we just had it, right? Like, I look for stuff that is generally neutral, right? Like something that is, I'm not going to say Harman because in the treble that's its own issue, as I mentioned. But for example, that the bass shelf, having a bass shelf below 100 hertz is a good thing in my opinion. Having ear gain at 3K is a good thing in my opinion. So I look for generally neutral, right? Or generally, let's call it, even if you want to call it preference neutral, right? What most people prefer. I like that myself, right? I try and find that. But as we just saw, someone said, yeah, they didn't like the K371. They want more flavor. They want more, something more that elevates certain frequency ranges over other ones. And in that sense, maybe they'd like a DT770 better, right? They'd want more, something more bassy, something less bassy, who knows, right? But they want something a little different from a more referencey kind of sound. And there is a sense in which, I think Taryn has mentioned this a long time ago, but like it's worth it to understand, to watch a number of reviews, right? And understand what kind of sound the reviewer likes the best, and then think about how your preferences might align or be different, and then that'll help you make your judgments. But again, beyond that, you don't even need to do that. Like if you just, this is like what Kryn said in one of his recent videos about, you can literally see sound. You can literally predict that stuff. That's pretty easy to predict. Bass level, treble level, that kind of stuff. You just look at a frequency response graph. What you don't want to do though is base. You don't want to say that the frequency response graph is going to tell me everything, because it might tell you everything, if we were analyzing it in exhaustive terms, but we're not. We only ever analyze it in terms of target adherence, and that's not enough. But at the very least, if you can say, I'm not going to like this headphone because it has a massive peak at 8.5K, like the DT1990 Pro, that's enough to not buy it, in my view, right? Or if you say you really like strong, powerful bass, and you're looking at a headphone, like honestly, even the Hifiman Sundara, you say, okay, well, that doesn't have the bass shelf. I know that I prefer something like a DT770 or whatever. You get the idea, right? There are things that you can find objectively in frequency response that you can base your judgments around, or at least you can cross things off the list as things you might not actually enjoy, especially if you don't do EQ. Dan's audio reviews said the SA6 are his favorite smooth, non-fatiguing IEMs. Aha, okay. I'm sorry, I don't know who Dan is. Then whoever Dan is right. Yes, I agree. Trying to reproduce the recording correctly is an exercise in futility. Yeah. I mean, also, this whole thing about how the artist intended. Have you ever spoken to artists when they talk about how they want their stuff to sound? I don't know. What does Resolve like that Andrew hates? You mean the other Andrew? I have to think about that one. I know Taryn and I have very different preferences. Very different preferences. Taryn is just like, he wants all the bass, and for me, I want distinct, specific bass. One more. All right, I'm gonna have to check out this Dan guy now. I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about. I wish that one day I could do like a reviewer tier list, but I don't think that's fair. That's like taking pot shots. I don't want to do that. The only way I would do that is if it was like very obviously a joke. All right. What does Metal 571 do for a living now? I think the same thing he did before. I don't think he ever did headphone reviews for a living. Oh wait, he does recording like sound demos. That's bad then. And if you're doing like sound demos for headphones, are never going to be accurate. Even in the best cases, there's a compounding effect. It You could theoretically get it to be accurate for the person in the room doing that comparison, but you can't ever get it to be accurate for an audience. That's the problem. Everyone is an F tier. Oh god, no, I wouldn't. I wouldn't do that. I'd put everybody in S tier, and I put myself in. No, I'm just kidding. He's a sound demo meme guy. Okay, sorry. Then I'm. That's too bad. Yeah, even for comparison purposes, you're not going to actually get to the result. The problem I have with this, and I've said this before, the problem with sound demos is that people will assume that that's actually what the thing sounds like. If you know that this isn't representative, if you know that this isn't actually what it sounds like, and there's something useful that you can get from this, right? And there's even interesting experiments that can be done with sound demos. But yeah, as long as he has a ton of caveats and actually explains the reasons why you can't, why sound demos are actually not representative, then that's fine. But my worry is that people won't like experiential information, experiential knowledge is extremely compelling, much more so than any other. Like I can tell you everything that I know about headphones and audio and stuff, right? And frequency response and all this stuff. And you could learn about this. You could spend months learning about all this stuff, and that won't be anywhere near as compelling as just having an experience of a thing. So for the same reason that like these other, I see you guys talking about these other people who are like reviewing headphones by just analyzing a frequency response graph without ever having heard them, that is nonsense. It's bullshit. But for that same reason, sound demos are not they're just not representative. You have your own HRTF, which is going to be different, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is that the coupling is going to be different. The third thing is you have to control the most significant variables. You have to control the playback or reproduction equipment, like the headphones that the audience is using, and you can't do that. Like inevitably you could say, oh yeah, this is like you need to have this headphone in order for this to work, and people will go, oh yeah, that's fine, right? It's just way too many things to be able to actually make that conclusive of anything. And that's even assuming that the recordings are done in the right way as well, right? So it's yeah, it's the same issue with Olive as well, right? And I'm not sure if Olive has come around on that, but where you're doing sound demos, it's like, this is not what this thing actually sounds like. Yeah. He does present it as if that's what it sounds like in real life. That's a problem because you can't. I'm not gonna say they're entirely worthless, because there is potential to get some sort of comparative value there, right? But it's more that it is misleading. It's not intentionally deceptive or anything. I don't think they're trying to do that, but it is misleading. Because people might walk away thinking, "Oh, this is what it actually sounds like," and it doesn't. And you can test this yourself actually. If you happen to have the headphones that are the sound demo is you could take that sound demo and then listen to the same track on the actual headphones, right? And go, does that sound the same? Yeah, that's no good. I mean, at least in my case, every time that I've listened to a sound demo, it hasn't actually not using these obviously, but like, using in the right circumstances, even in the best cases, it's never actually sounded like the headphones in question. If you're using it, for comparative purposes, I can see some value there, but I just worry that people aren't going to be taking it like that. Oh god, Tank Pods uses uncorrected ears. Yikes. Oh, he does make commentary. Okay. Well, maybe I should just check out this Dan guy and then make my own assessment of that. Yeah. If he's being misrepresented, then I don't want... Yeah, that's no good. Only the general tonality characteristics are consistent. Even that. Like, and people often ask, why don't you just do sound demos? Like, we can, actually, and I'd considered it. We can theoretically do extremely advanced sound demos, but for all these reasons, I don't want people walking away from a video with a sound demo and thinking, oh yeah, that's what it actually sounds like. That's just harmful. To, again, that thing I talked about earlier, where what I care about is the public consciousness towards a given, to get towards a given thing. Measurements are as close as we have, but it of course, even that is not going to be exactly your experience. Exactly. I mean, there are, watch the 10, if you haven't yet, watch the 10 stages of it. I should have put the sound demos in there, but it was not really the right thing. But if you watch the 10 stages videos, like stages 8 and 9 are, especially stage 9 is probably the best reason why sound demos are flawed. All right, I will check out Dan's audio reviews. They're just talking about some guy named Dan. I feel bad for the guy if he's been misrepresented. Okay. I think I'm gonna call it there, guys. Thanks to everybody for tuning in, and we will have more videos for you guys in the near future. All the usual stuff. If you like this kind of stuff, like, subscribe, typical YouTube things. And say happy birthday to DMS on his channel. Or on upcoming videos that he does. Yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one.